to the reading of his word.
Good morning and happy Sabbath. Today we're going to study the story of how Jesus saved the demoniacs. It's found in Mark chapter 5. I'm going to begin with Mark 5, verses 1 through 5. If you want to follow along, just open it up to Mark chapter 5 in your Bible. Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs. And no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. And the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. The first thing I want to say is to address to the little ones, to the children in the audience. These men sought a life with no limits and no rules. No one could tame them, and they would tear free of every restraint. Has your child ever asked, why can't I play as long as I want? Why can't I do whatever I want? A pursuit of a life with no rules, not even God's rules, put these men in the worst prison this world has ever had. Second thing is, the moment I read this, I keep finding myself asking, why did Jesus choose to go this way? If you were going to reach the Decapolis and you wanted to witness to the people there are a lot safer ways to get there. In fact, Matthew helpfully adds this note. I've put it up on the screen for you. He says they were so violent, no one could pass that way. What does that mean? It means everyone else who went to the Decapolis went another way. And it's at this moment when I start to ask, why is Jesus doing this? This is not an accident. There are no accidents in Jesus' ministry. He has chosen to go here intentionally. And the next question is again, why would Jesus choose to do that? Well, when I ask why, I'm not asking, is Jesus right? He's God. Of course he's right. What I'm asking is, what is he trying to accomplish? There's more happening here than just saving some demoniacs, isn't there? I want to begin with an illustration. When I was in college, I spent a year at Walla Walla University. It's up in Washington State. And at Walla Walla, I had to take a PE credit. And I looked down the schedule of classes, and the most fun I could possibly have while getting my PE credit was scuba diving. So I signed up for scuba diving. And I thought, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to see coral, I'm going to see fish, we're going to have fun. And every week we drilled in the college pool. We got all our gear on. There's no coral, there's no fish, you're just preparing for that. And they kept telling us, at the end of the quarter, you're going to do your qualifying dive in the open ocean. And that's where you're going to see all the sea life. And they built it up. And when the quarter ended, and it was just before Christmas break, I had to drive up to their marine station. Now, the Walla Walla Marine Station is at Rosario Beach. That's an hour south of the Canadian border on the Pacific Ocean. You know what I'm headed into. I was getting to get the point as I drove through the snow-covered passes. And I got there, and in the morning, I got all my gear on. And they give you a wetsuit, and you get a mask, and you get gloves, and booties, and fins. And then the first clue that I was in for a tough time was when we had to walk down across a fresh powdering of snow on the beach just to get to the water. And the teacher said, there's no way this is going to feel good, guys. He said, the only way I can encourage you is that it is now colder on the beach than in the water. It's 50 degrees today in the water. So just get in there, check out your equipment. In about 5 minutes, come back out, don't go far, and we'll begin all your tests. I got in, and I thought my whole body would go into shock. It didn't even feel like I had a wetsuit on. Any part of exposed skin around my mask went numb in only a few minutes. I got back out, and they got us into the boat. First test. They hauled us out away from the beach, felt like about a quarter mile. They said, all right, you have a compass. It's on your inner arm. Take one bearing to the beach. Figure out the direction to the beach. Now dive into the water, go to the bottom, and swim up onto the beach. Don't surface or you don't pass. You'll have to do it again. Do all of this by compass. So we dove into the water and we saw the next problem. Not only were we freezing, but at slack tide, there's so much silt in the water, you could only see 6 feet. Now I'm about 6 feet tall. That meant any direction I looked, I could only see 6 feet. And so you're basically swimming into shore, watching your compass in one arm and touching the bottom. It took a while. We got out and they did the next test. Stay with me, I'm headed somewhere. They took us out into 30 feet of water, and they said, now we're going to pretend your air tank just failed. Dive down to the bottom, you get one breath of air, and on that one breath, swim all the way back to the top. When you're in 30 feet of water, you can see 6 feet. You can't even see the top. And the teacher said, well, that's easy. Follow the bubbles. You have to blow bubbles on the way up for safety, right? Because you've breathed in so much air that as it expands, it could injure your lungs. So he said, I'm going to make it easy. Blow bubbles, follow the bubbles. And that's what we did. Turns out it wasn't as hard as I thought. We swam back up to the top, still freezing. It was at this point that the class began to complain. They said, this is horrible. Why did you bring us here? We are freezing. We feel numb. We can't see any fish, any coral. We signed up for scuba diving, because it was going to be like the Great Barrier Reef. And furthermore, they said, you knew this, teacher. You take a class here every year, don't you? We didn't. You built this up. Why would you take us here? And I loved what my teacher said. He said, you're not going to be diving with the teacher for much longer. He said, my primary purpose is to train you. It's not to have a pleasure dive. He said, if I can take you out here, put you in a series of emergencies where you're freezing, you're distracted, you're miserable, and you can't even see where you're going, and you can get out of them, if I can train you to handle these conditions, then every other dive you have will be easier, won't it? He said, I'll feel like I did my job of training you. All right, well, let's gather the evidence. When the master teacher, that's Jesus, takes his whole group of disciples, that's the class, and he looks for a hard experience for them, not the easiest experience they could find, but actually one of the more dangerous places you could take them, around the region of the Gadarenes. He's trying to train them. What's the payoff? If Jesus can teach his disciples how to handle this situation, if he can teach them about the adversary they will face in ministry, well, wouldn't we say the same thing? Every other ministry experience they have is likely to be easier than this one, isn't it? The disciples would later deal with men who were demon-possessed, wouldn't they? But not by a legion. This guy has more than anyone else in the Bible, doesn't he? Let's continue with Mark 5, verses 6 through 7. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, what have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me. Okay, so if Jesus wants to teach his disciples about the adversary, what's the easiest lesson we can learn from this story? It's one of the easiest and clearest lessons. If you're going to face the adversary, don't go alone. Don't go alone. You want to face him with Jesus. If you can picture in your mind, imagine how this story would have a different ending or would change if the disciples had been in a different boat and they got to that beach only 5 minutes before Jesus. They would have to face the demoniac alone. Don't go alone. Well, how can we know that he is with us? Well, at various times in the Bible, when God's people faced a crisis, they would set aside some time for God. They would often start with a fast. If you go to the book of Esther, they declare a fast. Then they take a season of prayer and they seek to repent of all of their sins, right? That's how they would prepare to face the adversary, the crisis that was coming. All right, well, let's talk about the violence. Jesus wanted them to learn this is not a fight you can win on your own. Paul puts it well, and here it's in Ephesians 6:12. I'll read it for you. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. That's a rather large phrase, but an easy way to summarize spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places, that sounds a lot like my name is Legion, doesn't it? That's my name is Legion. We'll make it simple. All right, so what can we say? The youngest child here would be safe meeting the demoniacs with Jesus. The most capable adult here would not be safe meeting the demoniacs without him. Let's continue with Mark 5, verses 8 through 10. For he said to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." Then he asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Also he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. As we go through this story, it's time to ask, how did Jesus minister to people? First step, Jesus went where they were, but don't go alone. Second step, Jesus helped them. Jesus helped them. There are a lot of people, and this point stands apart even from people who are dealing with demon possession. There are a lot of people we cannot reach until we help them, until we find their needs and help. So the second point is Jesus helped them. You know, several years ago I met a homeless man at church. And as I was a deacon, after Sabbath school, I walked over and introduced myself and asked if there was anything I could do to help. And he said, "Yes, I just need a good night's sleep." You know what I was expecting. Can I have money? Right? That's what you're expecting, right? That's not what he said. He said, "I just need a good night's sleep." Well, I had observed that he was falling asleep there in the hallway on a chair. So I thought, this man's telling me the truth. So I said, I'll help him. So I said, I'll tell you what. Why don't you stay for church, have some potluck, have a meal. If you're here this afternoon, I will come. If I see you, I'm going to put you up at a hotel here, and you can have a night's sleep. I said, that's simple. I understand that. That's what you've asked for? We can do that. It's not that big of a deal. So I came that afternoon, and he was there. I took him to the hotel, got him a room, and as we were about to part, I thought, you know, I'm not doing that much help if I don't tell him just a little about God. So I started trying to witness to him. And I'm sitting there talking. I wanted to tell him about God and how God could fix his life. And I wanted to tell him about Satan and how Satan wanted to ruin his life. And about 30 minutes later, I realized I was kind of going on in a sermon like. And so I said, well, why don't I pick you up for breakfast in the morning? He said, that'd be fine. And I excused myself and went back home to my wife. And I was really on a high note. You know, I'm thinking, this is great. Church should be more like this. I found someone. I'm trying to help him. I'm witnessing to him. Well, in the morning, I went to pick this man up, took him to breakfast, and on the way, he starts talking to me. He says, Warren, last night you had a lot of things to say. You were really excited. And you seemed to think this was something I really need to know. He said, I haven't been sleeping. He said, when you sleep in a bus stop and it rains, you get wet and you can't sleep. And when you can't sleep, it's like there's a haze all through my mind. He said, I didn't understand a word you said. Now, I went home on this high note. I witnessed. No, he didn't understand anything I said. Do you know what he said then? He said, well, now I've had a good night's sleep. The haze is gone. Could you take me back through it this morning? He got a very subdued version of the same sermon. It was shorter, apologies. It was shorter, but now he could understand what I was saying. All right? Jesus came to seek and save the lost. How did he do it? He went where they were. Don't go alone. He helped them. There are a lot of people completely independent of this story that for a variety of reasons we can't reach them till we help them. All right, let's continue with the swine. Mark 5, 11 through 13. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, send us to the swine that we may enter them. And at once Jesus gave them permission. Then the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. There were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and drowned in the sea. You know, the violence in this story is not just about people, is it? It is easy to understand why fallen angels would ask to do this. It is harder to understand why Jesus would grant permission. So why don't we start with a simple point? As God's people, do we know that it is not right for us to eat pigs? We have in the Levitical law a health law that basically explains that eating pork is a threat to your health. It's not right for God's people to eat pork. Now follow this. If it's not right for us, is it right for us to get rich off of feeding it to other people and damaging their health? It's not, is it? If it's damaging to us, it's wrong to get rich off of damaging others. All right, well, how many pigs were there? Let's put it in focus. There were about 2,000, right? So at this point, I think it comes into focus. We can see the wall that Satan built to keep Jesus from reaching the Decapolis. If these people accept Jesus, what are they going to have to give up? Their wealth. The wall was the love of money, wasn't it? Okay, I think this is one of the most interesting things in the story. When Jesus granted permission for the fallen angels to kill all those pigs, what happened to that wall? What happened to the wealth of the Decapolis? Did you realize that Jesus gave the devil permission to tear down his own wall? And by the end of this, with all the pigs dead, the money's gone, isn't it? And these people are looking at financial ruin. Okay? Let's read a little further here. Mark 5:14-17. So those who fed the swine fled, and they told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that had happened. Then they came to Jesus and saw the one who had been demon-possessed and had the legion, sitting and clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who saw it told them how it happened to him who had been demon-possessed, and about the swine. Then they began to plead with him to depart from their region. So the devil begins to build another wall. And now it's the fear of calamity. What worse could happen if this stranger remains among us? It's a wall of prejudice. What does Jesus do to this wall? He sends them witnesses they will not refuse to hear. He went right around the wall by sending the two demoniacs to witness to the people of the Decapolis. Sometimes when you deal with a wall that's based on national prejudice, one of the easiest ways around it is to send someone of their own nationality to be the witness. They won't refuse to hear that. Let's continue with Mark 5:18-20. And when he got into the boat, he who had been demon-possessed begged him that he might be with him. However, Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he has had compassion on you." And he departed and began to proclaim in Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. Okay, there's another very simple lesson about witnessing here. If we want to witness, that's great. Who has to change first before we can witness? We do. Before the demoniacs experience this change, they cannot witness, can they? So as a church, we want to reform the Christian church. We want to restore the Sabbath of the fourth commandment. But that reformation must begin with ourselves. Only then can we reach others. All right? If we can tell our story, if they can tell their story, why can't we tell ours? And don't tell me that we're not qualified, because they were just demoniacs, weren't they? Some of us are concerned that we haven't memorized enough of the Bible. The demoniacs hadn't heard a single sermon from Jesus, had they? They were ready to witness, and witnessing never gets simpler than this. I'll read it again. Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you. What do we witness? Maybe we don't have the Bible memorized. We tell them what the Lord has done for us, right? And maybe you're worried that you'll run into that smart person at work who's an atheist and loves to skewer Christians. They like to make you the butt of the joke. They like to make you look foolish. But don't enter into any controversy at all with them. Just tell them what the Lord has done for you. I've never heard an atheist talk about how atheism conquered his anger problem. And you won't either. But you will hear that testimony from Christianity, right? Lastly, what if you're worried about talking to someone who's of a different religion? Sometimes religion comes up at work, and I think, great, it's my chance to witness. And they think, great, it's my chance to witness. And I get witnessed to. And the end is, why are you a Christian? It doesn't make sense to them because they're not. Don't enter into any theological controversy with them. Just tell them what the Lord has done for you. Do what the man born blind said. And one thing I know, and I'm not going to talk about anything else. I was blind. Now I see. Well, I have a few minutes here at the end. Let me finish the story about the homeless man that I was trying to help. See, before I went to take him out to breakfast, I hatched a plan. I thought, I got to help this guy. I talked to my wife. I got permission. And I picked up a copy of the newspaper with the classifieds. And I thought, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find this guy an apartment. I got my highlighter out. I was a little naive, I admit. Did not know what I was getting into. And I told him at breakfast, well, you know where to work, but you've told me you can't hold a job if you can't sleep. Makes sense to me. I'm going to try and find you a room. I'll pay the deposit. I'll help you get started. And then you are going to take it from there. See, I had this great plan. So I circled the first 4 apartments. I called up the landlord. We came out to visit. You can imagine how that went. I walk in. So you want to rent the apartment, Mr. Wilbur? No, it's for my friend. Okay, what's the story here? Why, he's down on his luck. I'm going to try and help him get back up. Okay, so you're going to guarantee his rent for the year? No, I'm going to get him started. Okay, I don't need to hear any more. Next apartment, I go there. Only one landlord was even willing to give us the application. And you know where that failed? Previous place of residence reference. Well, you can't write bus stop there. That didn't work either. So by mid-afternoon, I'm driving around going, this is not working. What am I going to do? And I came into my senses and I prayed, Lord, what do I do? We're driving around. I'm going, what next? Finally, I just asked him, how'd you become homeless? There's got to be a story there. And he told me. He said, I've got family only a few minutes from here. What? I'm trying to find you an apartment? You mean there's one close? I can see how off base I've been all day. I said, well, tell me what happened. He said, we got in a terrible fight, and they kicked me out. Okay. Well, it was nice weather. I had some money in my pocket. I wasn't having any trouble finding a place to sleep. I didn't worry about it. I thought they're going to feel so bad for kicking me out, they'll come get me. Then the weather turned. It started to rain. It got cold. The months passed. They didn't come. He said, I would call them from the bus stop, and I would tell them how miserable I was, and we would just argue, and they would not come and get me. He said, every night at that bus stop, I hate them more. It makes me so angry. And right then, the light went off in my head. Anger? I'm supposed to tell him what the Lord has helped me with? I know why I'm here. Okay, I just need to tell this man how the Lord helped me with my anger problem. That's what I'm here, Will. See, it took that long for the light to go off for me. And so I told him about my parents' divorce, how my family went up with a small mushroom cloud, and how angry I got about that, and how I held on to that resentment for years until the pastor at my church preached on forgiveness. And he made some really good points. First, he said, when you hold on to anger that long, the other person doesn't even know you're angry. They're probably states away. You're not affecting them. You're just poisoning yourself. I thought, boy, he's right. And boy, that's me. And so I went home that afternoon after church, and I said, Jesus, I'm going to ask you, I need help. I know I need help to forgive my parents for what happened to my family. And I tried to say it, and I couldn't. The words wouldn't come out. And you know, the pastor had finished with the story of Corrie ten Boom. You know the story of how she later met the Nazi prison guard from her own concentration camp. She had preached on forgiveness. He comes up and says, "That's wonderful, I want to be forgiven." And she recognizes him. And the words won't come out. And I thought, well, she prayed that Jesus would help her do this. I didn't have to deal with a Nazi prison guard. Good grief, nothing I dealt with was anywhere near that. Of course he can help me with my problem. So I asked, "Lord, the words won't come out. Will you just help me to say it? They're not even sorry. It doesn't matter. Help me to actually forgive." And this time I could get the words out, and I felt peace. So I shared that story with him, and I thought, well, I'm going to get you a hotel room for another night. But here's what I want you to promise me, I told him. I said, I want you to go in there, and I want you to make your peace with God. I want you to ask him to help you to forgive your family. It doesn't matter if they're sorry. It doesn't even matter if they care. It's only poisoning you. And God can't work a miracle for you if you hold on to your anger. He's promised me he'd do it. I said, "Promise you'll do it." He promised me he'd do it. I made him 3 times. And I said, "There's one more thing you need to do. You need to call up your family and say you're sorry. No arguments, no discussion. I'm sorry for what I did. That's all." He said, "Doesn't matter if they're not sorry?" He said, "At that point, I'm going to go home and pray about this." I didn't hear from him for a few days. And then I got a phone call. He said, "Warren," he said, "I prayed and God helped me to forgive. And I called him and I said I was sorry. They got right in the car and came and got me." He said, "I'm staying with my family right now, Warren. I wanted you to know that." At that point, I kind of felt a little sheepish because how many sermons did I give that guy? He got the Warren sermon not once when he couldn't understand it. The following morning, he got it again when he could. It took me the whole day to figure out witnessing is simple. You just tell them what the Lord has done for you. And one of the best ways to recognize one of those divine appointments is when God puts you with someone who has the same problem that you had. All right. We know Jesus came to seek and save the lost. What did he do? He went where they were. Don't go alone. He helped them. There are many people we cannot reach until we help them. Then he sent them out to witness. And that's the reason I love this story. It explains what witnessing is. Tell them what the Lord has done for you. Our closing hymn is number 373, Seeking the Lost.